Step 1, we want to limit any incoming toxins into the body. So what that is, we're looking at three main categories here: food, water and air. So food it can be a deceptive one, because what we know as food is not always the highest quality. In fact, there's sometimes stuff snuck in there that really isn't food at all, or it's certainly not suitable for human consumption. And what I mean by that is the difference between organic foods and non-organic foods. So let's take, for example, meat. It might be beef, and the cows are not grass-fed, they're grain-fed. Now, you may have a grain allergy, and if you're eating meat from a cow who has been eating grains, then you are still, in a way, consuming the grains. A lot of the grains that the cows are fed are not up to scratch to be sold to the market for human food. So you're getting really poor quality stuff in there. It may be bad, it may be riddled with bugs and all sorts of different things, and sure, it goes into the cow and it digests the different things, and then we're eating the meat. Unfortunately, if there is toxins and all sorts of nasty stuff within those grains, they are going into that animal and being stored in their fat stores, and then when you consume them, you end up consuming all of those toxins. Okay? So, not an ideal situation. So that's something you've really got to be very wary of, and that's why I tend to stick with grass-fed meats or organic meats, wild-caught fish, because fish are the same thing. Farm fish, often fed grains, and if you have a grain allergy, or even if it's just a sensitivity, you are now consuming all of that extra toxic load, and that's backing up your system too. Alright? Not a great way to make it work. Eggs, same sort of thing. So just remember, you want to try and get organic free-range eggs rather than just having your conventional free-range eggs, or even if you're getting cage eggs, which I really don't recommend whatsoever. The biggest rule though is, remember, you can only get what you can afford, and you buy the best of what you can afford. So when it comes to food, I put my protein, so meat, eggs, fish, at my highest priority, because if I'm getting the wild-caught organic stuff, then they're eating all of those natural things. So they may be eating their grasses or greens, or it could be even bugs, and fish eating other smaller fish and that sort of thing. Okay, so we're getting nutrients from the animals that we're getting nutrients from. Alright, so down on that list you are going to have your grains, if you eat them, vegetables, that sort of thing. Again, if you can afford to buy organic, fantastic. If you can't, just try and work within whatever's on the Dirty Dozen list compared to the Clean 15 list. If you don't know what that is, basically the Dirty Dozen is a list put out, I believe by, no, I thought it might have been USDA, but I don't know. I can't remember who it is. The list basically says these are the 12 most highly, I guess, contaminated or sprayed foods. So they are the ones highest in pesticides and chemicals and that sort of stuff. Whereas if you have a look at the Clean 15 ones, those ones are ones that generally there's not too much going into them, or they're not anywhere near as affected or absorbed. So keep that in mind. The other thing to think about with food is your packaging. Okay, so whatever your food comes packaged in can actually leach nutrients into your food, or cause other issues by that same sort of process. So stuff that is wrapped in plastics, plastic can leach out some estrogenic compounds. It will depend on what type of plastic it is, but that is a very common thing. One of my concerns has been in some of the bigger supermarkets, and that's seeing the organic foods wrapped up in plastics and stuff. But then I've also heard reports that they may come around and spray the rest of the produce overnight with something that may have some sort of a pesticide in there, which may be why they're wrapping them up in the first place. So I do understand, it just does get a little bit confusing. But just be aware of that whole packaging aspect, okay, because it can cause issues. The last one I want to talk about is I guess going back to the food allergies and sensitivities. Now, not all food is going to work well with your body, your digestive system. And that's not necessarily an issue all the time, but sometimes, and especially when you are really run down, you may find that your system just doesn't want to digest certain foods well or at all, and you may end up bloated or gassy or just lethargic with headaches or any of that sort of thing. So I really highly recommend an elimination diet to try and figure out what foods work best with your system and what foods do not work so well with your system. Because once you can go through that process and weed out the things that really aren't doing you any good, then you can focus on those foods that do make you feel good, and you're going to find healing is a whole lot easier. Imagine that even these foods that don't make you feel good, imagine that they're releasing toxins on their own, or let's say that they have an inflammatory response, and the inflammation alone is enough to make the internal environment of your digestive system more susceptible to toxicity, or could be like candida overgrowth, or a breeding ground for parasites or something like that. Okay. Yeah, so really look at that elimination diet and follow it, and then check back to it regularly. It's something that I've been doing constantly over the years, constantly tuning into what my body is doing, what it likes at the time, what it doesn't like. And the thing is, it changes. So I have gone from, when I first got sick, nightshade vegetables were terrible for me. So nightshades, I'm talking about your tomatoes, capsicums, eggplant, that sort of thing. I couldn't eat them. I would just react really, really poorly. But after going through an elimination diet, weeding them out for a certain amount of time, I was able to bring them back in later on, and they seem to sit well with me. Now, two of those foods in there, tomatoes and capsicums, pretty much my favourite vegetables, but they are also two that are on that dirty dozen list. So I was probably having way too much and getting far too many chemicals coming from those things. Now I will only buy them organic. So I'm really limiting that, and I'm finding that things, no issues whatsoever. So you will get over these allergies and sensitivities if you continue to work to improve that digestive system. So let's move on to water. Is your water clean? Now, there's a lot of people will argue that tap water is as good as anything else. Well, I really do not agree. With fluoride being added to the tap water, fluoride tends to have all sorts of negative responses, reactions within the human body. Why it's actually been put in the water, well, they really argued initially that it was to do with the teeth and quality of your teeth, but I believe that the fluoride component is more a topical thing rather than a system thing. So if you're putting fluoride onto your teeth, then that's going to have a better impact and actually improve things, or could improve things, or compared to when you're drinking it in your system, it just becomes a toxin. It's not necessarily going to aid the teeth in that respect. There's plenty of research on it, do your own, but I do recommend getting something without the fluoride in there. There are other chemicals that can be in there in your water as well. It varies from country to country, city to city, just depending on what quality the pipes are that the water is delivered in, what the source of the water is, the environmental pollution that may be around or not around. So first things first is get some sort of a filter. So you're going to have to do your research as to what you think is best, but get some sort of a filter to start with. Even if it's just one of those basic jug filters, it will clean up some of the toxic compounds in the water and filter that out so you have cleaner water than tap water. Stepping up from there, you'll be able to get things that will filter a whole lot more out. So I have a Durand water filter, which is, it filters out your main stuff in the first stage, which is your chlorines and your other heavy metals, or metals and particles and that sort of thing. And in the second stage, it filters out fluoride. It is not a reverse osmosis system, and they say that reverse osmosis is the the biggest one for really purifying everything and taking away all of the impurities. But there is lots of technology coming into the water industry at the moment too, whereas people are figuring out different ways of making it better and better and better, cleaner or more absorbable, usable by the human body. So again, it's really up to you to do your research, but clean water is an important one, because if you are drinking and constantly blocking up your system with toxins, then that's no good. We want to limit how much is coming in everything we do. Lastly, air quality. So is your air fresh or is it recycled air? Are you living in a house where the windows are open and you have airflow coming through there? Do you have fans on to help filter some of the air, circulate the air, pick up some of those dust particles in the air and keep that out of your breathing system? Air conditioning. If you have the air conditioning on, is everything closed up? If it's all closed up, you're now in a sealed system. There's no fresh air coming in, so that air is then recycled, recycled, recycled. You're breathing in other people's air. You don't have the trees doing their job of filtering the oxygen, allowing you to breathe more fresh air in and leaving you feeling a whole lot better. Now this applies at the office as well. Offices generally do not have windows that open in many cases. If you do work in an office where you can open a window, fantastic, that's great, but you may be met with arguments from all sorts of people. So that is something to bear in mind. Your car is another one. Again, the air conditioning thing, or just having the windows up. I like to have my windows cracked just a little bit, even if it's in winter, even if it's in rain, even if it is raining. And in my last car, I had window strips along there, which would basically sit along the top of the window, so even if I did wind it down a crack while it was raining, I would still be able to get enough fresh air in there. I might have the fan going on without the air conditioner, just to bring some air through the car and out the windows, or vice versa, just to keep it circulating. And that's something that I highly recommend too. We can go deeper into that air quality with what's in your home, car and office, and we'll do that further on in the video. But the main thing is limit those incoming toxins any which way you can. Look at your food quality, look at your water quality, look at your air quality, and clean them up to the best of your abilities.